And we're live. Good evening, Shifties. Haha, just kidding. My name is Tito Amogus. Welcome back to Shift the Journey. This is my show where I get to talk to somebody different every week so they can talk about their journey. This week, we have a special guest. His name is Alex Johnson. Alex and I were actually stationed together years ago. We met on a deployment to the Middle East in 2007. And so I have a little, yeah, I'm about to share my screen. Here we go again with the sharing the screen. Here we go, entire screen. Let's show this one. All right. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah.
Where are you in this picture? I was looking here. It's kind of grainy because like I actually zoomed in. It actually looks something like this. But yeah. So this is the old jet that we worked on. I can't see
one of the ones with hair somewhere.
Yeah. J Stars for everybody who doesn't know, we were stationed in Georgia. We were at Robins Air Force Base, and we worked on the Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar System, aka J Stars E8C, which is a Boeing 707 outfitted with all kinds of, at the time, the latest and the greatest surveillance equipment. But today it would be vastly outdated. They don't fly anymore, right? They're gone. They're all gone, right?
They're done.
Yeah. So here, that's me right there. Where were you? See Grice back there.
I don't know. I'm probably somewhere in the back trying to hide in my young cool guy days, you know?
Yeah, young cool guy days, of course. All right, let's stop sharing. All right, so
incriminating.
It was funny. You know, what's funny is that, like, we were just talking. We were in the studio. We were just talking about, Alex and I were just talking about, like, when we were younger, which for him was not as long ago as it was for me. But this guy, kind of a bad boy, back in the day. And then, like, I was gone for some years or whatever, and we caught up again. And this guy was like a first sergeant. I was like, who the heck let this guy become a first sergeant? What the heck is even happening? What? Yeah, we were just like, Angela and I were like, are you serious? But, many years had passed, and you had matured a bit, slightly, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right. So this guy's coming out of Raleigh, North Carolina. But where are you from originally, if you can share with the audience?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the southwestern Pennsylvania area. So I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up in the southwest corner there, closer towards Morgantown, West Virginia than Pittsburgh. But then moved to Dallas, Texas as a preteen, and that's where I joined the military from at 17. Married with a kid, because all of the life lessons I had to learn the hard way, as you alluded to previously.
Yeah. Oh man, this guy actually, let me take it off topic one more real quick. But this guy, my very first guitar that I ever had was given to me by this guy. I still have it. It's the Ovation, the red Ovation. Yeah, Ovation applause. And let me tell you, trying to get that thing to sound like a normal guitar in a large church is very difficult. I had to buy all kinds of different things. I had to do all kinds of different things on the board. But I played that thing till the wheels fell off. And finally got myself a Breedlove. Well, Angela bought me a Breedlove when I was retiring. It's my retirement gift. I got it the day before my retirement, and I played it for my retirement. Anyway, how old were you when you joined the Air Force?
17. 17 by a couple of months. My birthday's in April, so just turned 40 this year. I was 17 in April, and then joined in October. So
your mom had to. Yeah. Your mom had to sign your enlistment.
I was married with a kid. Actually, so I was emancipated.
Oh, right.
Didn't have to have anyone sign off or anything like that. I was a legitimate adult who couldn't buy cigarettes and all those kind of things when I went to basic training. So,
but you could serve your country.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy if you think about it. So, did you come in with a job in mind, like a certain job?
So I kind of lucked out. Both of my former in-laws were both old Air Force folks who had gotten out and do flight simulator work for American Airlines and had for years and years and years. Still do to this day. So I had down in the South, when you got somebody's daughter pregnant and you have to meet them for the first time, obviously that's a challenging conversation to prepare yourself for, especially at that point I was 16. So, but I had a lot of good guidance from his name was Mike, from Mike about, well, this is happening. You obviously y'all are in this position. What are you going to do now? And so a lot of those conversations kind of led me down the path of wanting to join the military because I was a GED kid. I'm a high school dropout. I got my GED because my probation officer told me I had to. Like you said, some of that bad boy living. I didn't make good decisions a lot early on in life, so had to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do with myself. And working stocking shelves at night at Toys R Us wasn't going to cut it. Obviously, that was a good long-term decision because Toys R Us is out of business now too.
Right.
But I had to figure out what I was going to do with myself. So the military was kind of from the outset what we kind of looked at doing. And ironically enough, this is pre-September 11th, right? I went to the Marine recruiter with a GED, and they laughed me out of the office. I wanted to be a combat engineer, go set up mobile bridges and do demolitions and those sorts of things. And they laughed me out of the office. So went right next door to the Air Force recruiter, and they had me take an ASVAB, the pre-ASVAB test, and worked pretty well. So they were like, I think we can work with you. Ultimately did. And I knew I wanted to go into something mechanical. Aircraft mechanics was one of the things that Mike had talked to me at length about, and kind of sounded like an interesting venture, getting to be that flying crew chief and all that. But they didn't have an open position for it. So I went in open mechanical, knowing that I would be in that realm, but would probably have to make some choices after I completed basic. Ultimately, I picked the heavy crew chief, got heavy crew chief as a priority, and on we went about our career from there.
Wow. So what was your first duty station? I know you were stationed before. From what I can remember, I know that you were stationed in Greenland, but that was probably like a 1 year remote, right?
It was. So my first duty station was McConnell Air Force Base, working KC-135s. I was a bad kid there too, so got in trouble a lot early on in my career. So I lasted about till I got my 5 level on the flight line in a couple of months, and then they moved me to CTK because I was a problem kid.
Wait. CTK was tool crib? You're like handing out tools?
Tool crib. Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
Oh, hey. These acronyms come back, but I'm sure other people are like, I have no idea what that is.
Right. Yeah. So made it into the tool room, handing out tools because they didn't want me working on airplanes too much anymore because I was a heathen. But during that time, as I was applying for how do I get out of here? How do I, middle of nowhere, Kansas, Wichita, Kansas is, the second largest city in Kansas next to Kansas City. But there wasn't a whole lot that kept me positively influenced, shall we say. So found my way out in applying for a postal duty, which they don't even have anymore. But it was
really
fully Air Base Greenland. Yeah. So now it's an additional duty for like your admin folks, like your customer success folks, essentially on the Air Force side. Those folks have that as part of their role. But in the past, there were 623 postal positions across the United States Air Force, all of which were overseas positions, 3 of which were chiefs. So they used to have a chief whose job it was to sit at JFK International Airport, Miami International Airport, and San Francisco International Airport. So all mail that was going to Europe went through JFK. All mail that was going to South America was going through Miami, and all Pacific was going through San Francisco. So I lucked out and got one of those 623 positions. They sent me to a DoD school, a Department of Defense wide school. So you had Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, all going to the same school at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. one of the nicest installations on earth.
Wait, is that? I was like, wait a minute. That sounds like sarcasm. And I've heard about it before too. You know, I have some friends and family who are in the Army years past, and so no.
Yeah, nothing will make you feel good about being in the Air Force than going to an Army base. Yeah.
The first time I ever experienced that was I was stationed at Robbins, and I went to what was the one? There was one near Savannah, Fort Stewart. Yeah, I remember going, and then I was like, "Where is the base?" Well, post, right? Where? But I was like, you know, where is the base? And I'm like riding my motorcycle. I'm like, where is this? And I went to talk to somebody. They're like, "Oh, you're on post," and I'm like, I didn't see the gate. They're like, "We don't have a gate." I'm like, what? Yeah. You not have the gate, you know? And it was the most bizarre thing ever. And then like everything looked, I thought I was in the projects, but it was an Army post.
Right. But no, so I got to go to that school at Fort Jackson. It was like a 4-week school. And then I went to Greenland for a year and worked in the post office. And it was awesome. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
But one of the fun stories I get to tell is that I lived too far north to see the Northern Lights, which was awful.
That's so
it was one of my life dreams to see the Northern Lights. And they sent me to the top of the world. Literally the one place you could go to a bar or have a drink after work or whatever was called the Top of the World Club because it's the only bar that far up, right?
Oh, that's funny.
But you were too far north to see the Northern Lights. They're like a halo that sits over the top of the globe. And I was well within it.
That's hilarious. Yeah. But did you see it in North Carolina? Because I have family and friends.
In Florida when it came down. So we went to a music festival down at the Daytona Speedway. So we were too far south to see it at that point.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, no, there are people in my neighborhood who are like, "Oh, we can see it," but like north of us, there's a street back there, but there's a street lamp, like a street light that's like right behind the house. So of course I couldn't see anything. And then we're like, it's kind of late. I'm old. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to get dressed again and then go drive to the top of the neighborhood just so I could see Northern Lights, which I actually saw when I lived in Spokane. But Angela's never seen it, but we saw it all over Facebook. So whatever.
That's one of those like we'll plan our international trip someday and go to Iceland or Norway or somewhere like that.
Yeah,
I'll see it that way.
Definitely. So you're in Thule for a year, and then when you're getting ready to leave, or when you're like working on your next duty station, did they give that to you? Did you have a choice of where you wanted to go, or was it like, here's your choice, you have one place to go? Air Force requirement.
So you get a small list of options, because when you get those remote opportunities, at least the way that it worked back then, is you would have a small select, like 3 bases you could choose from that were back CONUS that you would select as your follow-on assignment.
Yeah.
So I think my initial selection was for Tinker Air Force Base,
Oklahoma.
And as soon as I got to Thule, I found out you could decline your follow-on and get another choice. So I waited until the assignment cycle had lined up better, declined Tinker, and was then given another round of options. My other round of options was Tinker Air Force Base, McConnell Air Force Base, and Warner Robins Air Force Base.
No, that's so funny.
We got a new one, right? We got so that was ultimately what led me to picking Warner Robins out of my follow-on list. Because what's ironic is that was right in that first round of force reductions, right?
So
2006 or so, 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
So there were a great many folks who had gone to basic with me or gone to tech school with me that were not offered reenlistment at all. But because I had gone to Thule, is I had to do an extension to accept that assignment. So my reenlistment cycle was just outside of that force reduction. So had I not gone to Greenland, I might not have made 21 years in the Air Force.
Wow, that's nuts, man.
Providence being what it is,
Yeah.
The sun shines, right?
That's pretty crazy. So I actually I knew people who left Robbins. They were there with us, and then they left on a remote so that they could have a choice of somewhere to go after they left there. and then they went right back to Robbins.
Yep.
Like there was one guy, he went to GK, right? Geilenkirchen, for like 2 years. And he comes back and I'm like, hey, where you been? And he's like, I was stationed at GK. I was like, really? I thought you were like TDY or deployed because like we were always gone. And so it was like,
right.
There were times where like I had probably at one time probably like 30 or 40 people in the ComNav shop, maybe. Right. But there were some people that I remember working with on a shift going, dude, I think the last time I saw you was like a year and a half ago, because, we're like TDY over here, they're deployed, and then I'm deployed, and then they're somewhere else. And so that was crazy. It was some times, man.
Well, that was like, even with a lot of the deployment tempo that we had there at Robbins, you'd be deployed for 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, whatever it was.
Right.
And you typically had to have around 45 days at home before you could go back on the road again.
Right.
Well, I would go right back on the road again a lot of times. I was young and single. That was the life I was living. So I'd take those trips. I went times without having an actual apartment because I was going to be on the road so much.
Yeah.
So
I knew several,
or, whatever. So
yeah, I knew several single folks who were like that. But like even being married, they didn't tell me like, oh, you have a cooling off period. They're like, oh, hey, we got this TDY to Vegas, and it's like, I've been to Vegas so many times. But I'll take it. Or, hey, you're supposed to go to Nebraska for 4 days. So inside joke to everybody out there, Alex and I went on the TDY temporary duty. For all those who don't know what TDY is, temporary duty to Omaha, Nebraska. It was the base there, Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. Right. You got stationed there later, right?
That's where I ended my career from.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Did they know that you killed rabbits? But that was just something else.
No, they didn't nickname me Killer for that reason. I was nicknamed Killer for something else. But
yeah.
What's ironic is when I got stationed back at Offutt, they had a big maintenance facility, right? It's a huge maintenance operation.
Yeah.
That had flooded during after one of the blizzards, had dumped a ton of snow, and then it all melted over a relatively warm period. So all of that water had flooded the entire maintenance facility. So they had to move the entire maintenance operation to an alternate location on base, which just so happened to be the hotel that we got kicked out of. Continue your story. Yeah. So it was like, hey, show up here on your first day. And I'm like, this looks familiar.
Yeah, it looks really familiar.
Pretty sure this is where it happened.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Bunch of GIs with nothing to do in a broken plane, and there's rabbits everywhere. And somebody decided they want to catch someone. And we got a couple, and that was the first time I ever tasted rabbit. So I tell that story all the time. People are like, what? Yeah, we went caveman. Anyway, all right. So what year was it that you got to Robbins?
It would be 06 07 timeframe.
So, and then we met on that deployment. It was July to October when we met. So that's another thing. I mean, you're in another shop. You're actually in another building, but working on the same planes. I didn't know you. I never met you, and it wasn't until July, that I met you. So, I mean, you can be stationed with people and never see them. It's pretty crazy.
What's one of the unique things about being military too is having that ability to be gone from someone for a long period of time, and then you meet back up after a prolonged period because you both might have alternated trips or something. It could be a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you get back together around each other, and you're like you never left, right?
Yeah.
That camaraderie, that brotherhood, sisterhood, in whatever fashion. That's what makes the military unique.
Yeah, I remember talking with somebody on the show a few weeks back, David Staten. He was my chief when I was over here at 2nd Air Force, and we were talking about having lived somewhere where there's like no military community. It was really tough. was really tough for somebody who's like just got out of the military, because like when you're in the military, all these people your age or around-ish your age who've all been through the same experiences, whether it's like the same types of experiences, basic tech school, base PCS, all the stuff, or like actual like going somewhere together, TDYs, deployments, stuff like that. And then you go somewhere where, like for me, went to Nashville and there's like, I didn't know anybody who was in the military over there. That was weird. Or like I met people who had been in the military, but not in the same decade that I was, or the same 2 decades that I was in the military.
Right.
There's one guy that I worked with often. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got out in like 1981." I'm like, I was in first grade when you got out, So that was crazy. So when you got to Robbins, did you have any, you were what, a senior airman or a staff sergeant?
I was a senior airman. And I got tasked for a deployment within my first couple of months there, right? So I got there in May. I want to say it was 06. So it might have been the following year that we had met.
Yeah.
It had to have been 06. But I got to Warner Robins in May. In July, I was in the desert. So I left Greenland in May to Georgia to the Middle East within the span of like 2 months. That was a rough time. Getting to acclimate to all of those different climates over a short span.
Oh yeah.
So was at Robbins until like 2014, I want to say. I got picked up for the acquisitions job down in Melbourne, Florida. So got to go live in a Northrop Grumman facility in Melbourne, which was pretty cool, doing defense acquisitions for ISR platforms or intelligence surveillance reconnaissance platforms. And then that unit shut down. The job stayed the same, but the unit itself was closing at that location due to some contract things going on, and they moved us all back up to Warner Robins. So it's like I got away from Robins, came back to Robins. It was like the story of my career was bounce around here, bounce around there. This unit's closing, this organization's closing, go somewhere else.
But like overall, man, you think about everybody that we knew who was stationed there. Robbins was like a black hole. I mean, there are people, we know people who had their entire careers there. Entire career. Like tech school, once they graduated tech school, they went to Robbins and then they never left. When I left, I had been there for 10 and a half years on the dot. And I remember like my last week talking to I can't even remember this guy's name. He was like, maybe you remember, he was an E&E, and he was like, he was a tech sergeant, and he was like medium height, black guy. And he had like a silver or gold tooth. Man, I can't remember his name. Cool dude. And we were in the flight line chow hall, and he's like, where you going? So we were talking, and he's like, I said, how long you been here? He said 13 years. I'm like, what? And I'm pretty sure he retired out of there. But like, I saw people leave unwillingly at like 17 years. One guy I worked with in QA, he left at 17 years. He had orders to like Germany, and he did not want to go. I'm like, what? Everybody wants to go to Germany. Are you kidding me?
Right.
But he didn't want to go because he's from South Georgia. I can't remember his name. He's a crew chief, I thought, but he's from South Georgia. His brother was stationed at Moody. I ran into him when I was at Keesler, and then I was in the Stanleyville, and so we went to Moody, and so he's from South Georgia, and then like he's only lived in Georgia, and then only lived outside of Georgia for basic training tech school, Texas. The craziest thing. But anyway, so when you were at Robbins, did you have any, like at the time, did you go, oh yeah, I'm going to go 20, I'm going to do 20 years? Or were you like, I'm going to get out and go into the music business?
No. So when I first got to Robbins, obviously went on that deployment, came back from that deployment, and I was coming up on the end of my extended first term as I looked at getting out. But that was hedging up against the 2008 financial crisis. And when I started looking at jobs that I could do as a young man with very little experience, didn't have my degree done or anything like that, it was like, do you want to be a policeman, firefighter, or go back to school? And the looking at the options at the time, I was like, well, I'll just re-enlist for 4 and kind of figure it out in that time. And then, the drill, once you come up on that next enlistment and you're like, well, I'm getting closer to that mark. I might as well. Or things are going really well. Like, I think the best years in were like years 12 through 15. Like, that was my best time. Granted, like you said, I was a little bit of a problem child. So I ran the E4 Mafia, if you've heard of it. I ran the E4 Mafia until I made tech, I couldn't be a cool kid anymore.
Right.
But, those years were probably the best ones in. So once I got to that point, it was like, well, I'm staying now. Obviously you get out and get into the civilian world and see what your options are a little bit. I think that's one of the things eventually we'll talk to is like, you don't know a whole lot of things on the civilian side because it is so big and broad and there's so many different things you can do and ways you can do it. That, hindsight being what it is I probably should have gotten out at 8 years. But I don't regret making the choice that I did by any stretch. Because obviously it got me to where I'm at today and in a little bit more flexible of a situation. But certainly at that point, I was planning on getting out until those options kind of dried up or didn't seem appealing enough. Was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to re-enlist, did that, and then ended up staying the rest of the time.
Yeah, for me, it was 10 years, and I was thinking about getting out. We were going to move to Nashville. I was going to try to go to school school full time while working full time. And then it was just like, man, we don't have enough money to go around for that. Nashville was one thing that we thought about. We talked about Athens was another because, I was in school. I was trying to get all my stuff transferred to University of Georgia. Go Dogs, the hat right there. But it didn't work out because it was just like too much debt. And then it was just going to be too painful. And so I was like, man, I'm just going to re-enlist. I ended up re-enlisting for 5 years and then re-enlisting for 5 years. And it was like, or like the extension, like 4 years in the extension. And that was it. Mm-hmm. But so when you were like around your re-enlisting, did you think, oh, one day I'm going to be a first sergeant? How did that come about?
No. So
what in the world did that come about?
Doing the shirt thing was an additional duty. So I was never a diamond wearer, right?
Okay.
I just did additional duty for you're supposed to do it for a couple of months as like a career progression type thing. See if you want to do it before you apply. But I was never going to be able to apply. I didn't have the retainability. Didn't plan on getting the retainability.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing it for about close to 2 years. As the AMXS undershirt. So we had a senior AMXS at Offutt was one of 2 organizations that had a senior on Offutt Air Force Base because they were large enough to have one. So like we were supposed to have 3 first sergeants, 3 diamonds. We typically only had 2 due to manning, so that other 1 was typically filled. And I got to do that for a long while, and then served under the maintenance group first sergeant for all of the like group direct reports. So QA, your admin type folks, all that direct reported to the 06. I was their first sergeant there at the end. So that was more happenstance than anything. I was willing and able to do it. They needed somebody to be able to do it for a little bit longer of a span of time. So I was happy to fill that role, knowing that I was never going to get promoted out of that and that I was going to be retiring from doing that. So it was kind of a good circumstance for me because like you, I have the gift of gab and I like talking to people and getting out there and having as many conversations as possible. And, that value proposition that I was able to bring was largely being able to talk to those folks that needed some additional guidance and help folks through some of the issues that they were going to face with as much access to resources as possible, which is what a shirt is supposed to do. Right? You're that belly button for this is the problem, go and solve it. So you have connections with all of the different resources that are available. You know a little bit about everything. Jack of all trades, master of none. So you know who to connect folks to and where to go to get some of those problems solved.
Oh yeah. Like trying to find that type of person in the civilian world is kind of tough, right? Like somebody who knows everything or knows somebody who knows what to do with something or other, whatever. But that first sergeant was always, that was always somebody that you can go to when you had like some kind of question about anything. It was, great resource. So you told me your story about when you decided you were going to retire and like go to law school. But tell everybody about that. Tell everybody how that happened. So Alex is not in law school, and this is what
I am not. I might be close to a learned scholar in the most minimalistic sense, but I am not that kind of learned scholar. I joked about having shut down a couple of units and had to shuffle around. One of the units that I shut down was the 19th Area Refueling Squadron out of Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. So they had KC-135s. We're supposed to be getting KC-46s, the newer platform. And there were program delays, which meant that it was going to be north of a year and a half where there would be no KC-135s on the ramp, and they wouldn't have gotten their KC-46.
Ooh.
So they decided that they were going to move all of the active duty out instead of just having them sit for north of a year and a half without doing much. So
there's a lot of ping pong.
Yeah. So they made us all move. Anyone with more than 12 months retainability had to move, and you got an active duty service commitment tacked on top of that. And what that means for the non-military folks is that the military is going to make you move somewhere. You have to do at least 2 years or 3 years or whatever that commitment level is before you can separate or retire, just to make sure that the move was worth it. They're paying for you to move. They're going to get their money's worth out of you, right? So because I was at like 18 months left at that point, I had more than 12 months. I had to leave, and they were going to tack on an active duty service commitment. So I had worked it out. It was my job. I was appointed to help get all of those folks that were in the unit out of there. So that was my job, as I worked with the major commands, the assignment leads, to get everyone out of there, whether it was an exceptional family member program for those folks with like medical issues or kids with issues, or married military to military with different jobs. I would help source all of that. So I worked closely with the assignment teams. And one of the things that I had worked out for myself was that even though they were going to make me move from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base to Offutt Air Force Base, and I got that solely because I could pick, and that I could pick second out of all of the crew chief master sergeants, and the first person picked Robbins. So that was but Offutt was the only other option besides Minot and Minot Air Force Base up in North Dakota, or Whiteman Air Force Base in Knob Noster, Missouri. So I took Offutt. But I digress. So I worked it out with the assignment teams to where I had all of the documentation that when I applied for retirement at 20 years, which would be at that 18-month mark, right? They would approve it because it was an involuntary assignment. I didn't have a choice. It wasn't like, hey, here's your normal assignment cycle. Here's an assignment that you have to take or decline. It was this unit is shutting down. You have to leave. So I had all of that documentation, applied with it for retirement at 20 years, planning to go to law school. Like I had taken my LSATs, gotten my letters of recommendation, all of the application pieces put together, did some site visits, and knew kind of what schools I was looking at. Was in the application process for those schools to start in August. Applied for that retirement to retire in time to do that, and it was firmly rejected. So my application for retirement at 20 years was declined due to that active duty service commitment. They did not care about any of the documentation that I had. They said, that's cute and all, but we'll see when you apply next year, if you apply next year. So that's how I ended up doing 21 years. But when they denied my retirement request, and I worked through some of those contacts to try and rectify the situation and get it, and ended up not being able to do so, as a second time married guy with, an obstacle in life, I really sat down with the wife and talked about, what is important. Like I've been talking this whole time about going to law school. That'd be my long-term plan that I've been working towards for a long time. But for me to do that, when you start thinking through the logistics, is I'm going to be in school full time for 2.5, 3 years. I'm going to be out of the job market and not making any income beyond my retirement, maybe some disability, GI Bill, whatever. And we're going to move to wherever I get into the best law school I can. So, had I scored a 175 on my LSAT, I'd be applying to Harvard or NYU or Columbia or Stanford. And if any of them said, yes, you can go to this law school, I would have gone there. And that's where I would have lived. And that's where my life would have gone. So that it really required some coordination with the wife and talking through a lot of those issues. And once we did and had that actual conversation, the most important thing that kept coming up was like, hey, we have a choice of where we can live. We can be around our families and spend some time doing the things that we want to do and travel where we want to, when we want to. And so the job market itself was important. Being close to our families was important. And what I was going to be doing wasn't at all.
Yeah.
So the law school dream, if you will, I'd love to be a litigator standing in court, arguing against somebody else and just talking for a living, because that would be terrible for me, like I'd still love to do that, right? Yeah. But when you look at the reality of where you're at and where you're going, when you look at like the business side, that you have a lot of talk about 5-year plans and 10-year plans, right? And your long range forecasting. What does that 10-year plan look like for me? Like I said, I'm pushing 40 now, so my 10-year plan is to not be working. My nice. 5-year plan is to not be working. Well, how do I do that? Taking 3 years off to go to law school really didn't help me achieve that goal really at all, right?
Yeah.
So again, when you actually sit and talk through the logistics of things and look at what's most important to you, especially when you get out of the military, you have all of the choice in the world. If you want to go work at a factory and press the same button every day for the next 20 years, you can do that. Someone will pay you to do that. Yeah. But if you don't want to do that, you want to do something differently, you want to have a more family-focused life than you were maybe able to have, connect with those siblings, aunts, uncles that you lived around all your life or whatever, right? Is you're able to make those choices. So once we figured out what was most important to us from a couple's perspective, from a family perspective, it became really clear that law school wasn't how we were going to go.
Yeah.
And so that really kind of led me down a 6-month path from when I stopped working in the military until I found my next job, because I didn't know necessarily what I wanted to do when I got out, but I knew that I was getting out at that time, and I would kind of figure it out.
So, how did you land on like project management, like spin the wheel, throw the dart? What was your, like, I don't know, what was your thought process?
So I really truly believe this, and I hope I don't hurt anyone's feelings in saying it, is especially for some of the senior NCO community getting out of the military, is they think that's the right place for them to fit. And that's what initially steered me down. That was like, I saw a lot of people go down that path. Yeah. Heard a lot of people go down that path, and everyone kept bringing it up, whether it was TAP or, different conversations with, folks that had gotten out recently or whatever, because it is a big career path. There's lots of different ways you can take it. So it is a good kind of segue for a lot of that, like NCO, senior NCO, young officer, community. So I did what, the Michael Quinns of the world, if anybody doesn't know about him, he does, I think it's Higher Military, but he's a great resource, posts a lot. I met him through a retirement seminar kind of thing that was provided by the Top 3, and really just kind of started doing what he had talked about. It was like, network with people. If you don't know what a job does, search for someone who does it and find them on LinkedIn and send them a message and say, hey, I see you do this. I'd love to learn about your day-to-day, and do those, informational interviews. And I did a bunch of them. I probably did north of 150 of them before I even left Omaha and moved here to Raleigh. And once I got here to Raleigh, I mean, that was my full-time job, essentially, was doing informational interviews with anybody who would talk to me. So talk to folks in operations management, sales management, project management, program management, really kind of learn the differences between the two, join my local chapter of the Project Management Institute and went to a couple of events and really just focused on that networking piece to find my next opportunity. And one of the folks that I connected with was actually a military talent liaison for Wells Fargo here local in the area. And so I'd spent a lot of time hanging out with them and at some of the local networking events, had seen them at a couple of job fairs and stuff that I was going to. And I really went hard down that path working with him and ultimately got an offer from Wells Fargo to be a senior lead business execution consultant in the auto industry. However, also during those informational interviews, as I had met up with another person through the veteran community here locally, I had had a bunch of conversations with them and just kind of like touching base, right? Obviously send those thank yous after you get those conversations going and learn some information from them. But about 2 months went by that I hadn't heard from him, and he called me out of the blue and was like, "Hey, are you still looking?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm still looking. I got this offer with Wells Fargo in today, but I haven't decided yet if that's what I want to take." He was like, "Well, I have someone who's looking for work with Epic," and I never heard of what Epic was.
Mm-hmm.
I was vaguely familiar with it just by having a my chart at a doctor's office before.
Right. Yeah.
But didn't know what Epic was, and found out it was an Epic implementations role through Walmart Health. Didn't know Walmart Health was a thing. So got on the phone with them and with the hiring manager and had some conversations about what the role would be, what it would look like, what the organization was doing, and that sort of thing. And ultimately declined the offer from Wells Fargo to take the Epic project manager role with Walmart Health, and it was great. I think one of the challenges that a lot of folks coming out of the military face is they look for the names they recognize.
Yeah,
it has some good to it for sure, and there's a reason that they do it, right? Large company is stable and all that, and you're not in a situation where like Walmart Health closes, so you don't have a job anymore, right? But there's a lot of benefit to that startup community, that smaller employer community that a lot of people overlook, right? And you've worked for some smaller organizations before.
Yeah,
you have a lot more intimacy in those kind of situations where it's a lot easier to know who to go to because there's less people you have to figure out.
Yep.
Right? On top of that, in those like more startup kind of situations, is your day-to-day isn't going to be the same every day. The processes and programs that you're going to set up aren't going to be the same for very long because you're going to have that kind of exponential growth, that scalability as a focal point. And the requirements are going to change so frequently just because you're kind of chasing a market that you get a lot more depth of experience and breadth of experience that you wouldn't get if you're working in like a project management office at a Fortune 500 company. That's going to be a very, very rigid, hyper-focused position. Whereas a project manager at a startup might do everything from a sales management position to a sales position to a customer success position to an operations management position to a director position, where they might have this breadth of responsibility and touch so many different things within the business that you wouldn't otherwise get. So, having had some time to do some reflection, obviously you can find a bunch of reasons why this didn't work or that didn't work or whatever. And you can hypothesize all you want. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm very, very glad that I took the opportunity to work with Walmart Health and go down that path to learn more about Epic and how EMRs are kind of implemented, electronic medical records are kind of implemented as a new process, and took a chance to try and change the way healthcare is done in the U.S. Had some really great folks that I got to work with, both on the training team and throughout the broader organization. but I mean, you try new things, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I remember when you guys saw the open to work. I don't remember if you posted something on LinkedIn or if I saw the open to work banner, and I was like, or you messaged me, I thought. But anyway, I within a few days I saw an article about Walmart Health closing down, and I was like, oh no, yeah, huge. So then basically the market was flooded again, like the job market is flooded again with all these super qualified people. That's tough,
Yeah.
man.
Well,
So
especially
if
in
anybody out there has a role for my man here,
the
connect with him on LinkedIn, connect with me, whatever, and let's start having some conversations.
Well, yeah, that's one of
So
the things to further discuss too, right? Is
yeah,
especially where this is kind of shift the journey, right? As we're talking about the journey from military world to the civilian world, or just in your civilian journey overall, whatever it is,
right.
that journey for me is vastly different, right? Like how many people you got to talk to this week that have lived in Greenland, right?
Yeah.
Not very many, right?
Yeah.
At least I hope not. Otherwise, I'd love to know what your travel circles are. You might know some of the same folks, right? But no, like, you know, going from active duty military to the civilian world is a tough journey that a lot of folks, kind of are definitely fearful of making some of the wrong decisions, but also don't understand how great their safety net is, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have a
Oh
military
yes.
retirement coming in for those folks that are
Yeah.
retiring. You might get some disability, if you qualify for it. Hopefully, everybody gets out with 0% and they feel great for the rest of their life.
Right.
But if you're north of 35 ish, I'm sure you don't feel great every day. You probably got something going on with you, right?
Yeah.
So,
Lungs,
yeah, amongst whatever else
particulates
the
in the
issue,
air.
right?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but even beyond that, there's unemployment, right? You've been paying taxes for years and years and years. If you get unemployed, file for unemployment. I've met folks that are like, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." Like,
Yeah.
why? Right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not too proud to say I was let go as part of a, that's not a thing to be concerned about or prideful for, right?
Right.
Uh, but that safety net provides you a little bit of flexibility. There were folks
Yes.
on my team that had just bought a house not too long ago,
Oh,
and like that was their sole source of income, and they're single, and that's their employment, right? Like
yeah.
I worry for those folks to this day. I still reach out to folks every day and be like, "Hey, how's everything going?"
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not in that situation because having done 21 years in, I have a little bit of a safety net
Right.
that some other folks don't. So, I don't have to rush into the first available position that someone offers me.
Right.
Since the job at Walmart Health has gone away, all I've been doing is networking. I mean, we talked about it briefly before we started here. 2024 is the year of rebuild all of the furniture in my house, right? So I got some work in the garage to do too. But
Yeah.
I'm networking each and every day, learning stuff about different organizations, and trying to find what would really be good for me. Because honestly, I don't know that project management is necessarily the end goal, right? Project management can be very, very hyper focused on process and procedure and
Yep.
technical detail, right? There's a technical project manager, technical program
Yeah.
manager. Those are very, very in the weeds, data driven employment situations.
Yeah.
And I'm much more a people guy, right? It's
Yeah.
not to say that I can't do that. But if the world is your oyster and you're choosing what you want to do with yourself, maybe more customer success might be better for some of those folks that are much more on the people side, where your
Yeah.
entire world is solving clients' problems and linking up with whoever your clients are, your internal reps to help solve some of those problems, expedite situations, plan for what the client's needs are going to be, and help to address those things before they come up, and customer retention and all those sorts of things. That's talking to people. That's
Yeah.
working with people to solve problems, not developing a process, implementing a process, overseeing the execution of a process or program, right? So that might be something a little bit better. So you never
Yeah.
know what you're going to fall into.
Yeah. I feel like when I got out, they're pushing. I went to TAP twice. I thought I was going to get out early in 2014, but then I ended up staying, and then thankfully I finished my bachelor's and then got out in 2015. But they were pushing like project management. They're like, oh, lean Six Sigma, and then do all these things, project management. Yeah, that was like a big push. The other big push was like, cyber, go to school for cyber. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then it's like, you have all this experience doing this job as military, defense contractor, do defense contractor, or, wait 6 months cooling off period, right? And then apply for a civil service job. And I was like, I don't want any of those things. And it was tough because there weren't a whole lot of people that went before me that went in the path that I wanted to take. And
Right.
so I feel like if I had taken any of those paths, I probably would have failed miserably. I mean, I didn't have successes all the way along the way. I mean, it was a lot of ups and downs, but there's more out there than what they tell you in TAP. Believe it. Believe it.
It's understanding your audience too, right?
Oh yeah.
TAP is congressionally mandated, and it's for everyone from your E1s who's getting booted because they got a Dewey the day they got to their new base,
Yeah.
or your general officer also has to go through TAP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they customize the curriculum a little bit for senior leaders. But apart from that, it is meant to address everyone.
Yeah.
And by that, it's going to completely prepare no one, right?
No, it is too much.
Well, and again, I think, when you really look at, okay, you're getting out, what do you want to do? That is so unique a you question that is specific to the individual, that the only way you're going to get that answer is to talk to as many folks in different areas or industries or job titles to understand what challenges they face, what's good about their job, what's bad about their job, how much money they make, right? Like, these are all things you're not going to like Google search and solve without having those conversations, because you first get out, your questions are going to be pretty rudimentary. They're going to be pretty basic. Like, what does your day-to-day look like? What are some of the challenges you face? What's terrible about your job? What's great about your job? But the more and more that you do it, it's like, what tools does the company X provide you with to solve this problem?
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's a much more unique and tailored question that you get to after having 10, 15, 20, 50 conversations about that area or industry.
Yeah.
So
it's totally different.
Right. And that's why, every expert in the transition space that you see on LinkedIn or Facebook or Indeed or email or coming through TAP or whatever, they're going to talk about informational interviews, or they should be, as part of their solution for that transition journey. And I really think, to me, that was the biggest one that really kind of helped me not only find opportunities, but learn what opportunities I might be looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And going into data, I thought, oh yeah, I'm looking for a data analyst, but all the job titles are all different. And then all the requirements for entry level were all different. All the requirements and all the tools that everybody uses, tools and programming languages, all this stuff, it was all different, and it could be all different things in the same company. It was the craziest thing. So having conversations was, top of my list to try to figure out what in the world I wanted to do. So you talked about your career path, which is, you're still in there, man.
I'm back to the informational interviews
for you for that next job. But so I know there's something that one of the things I ask people toward the end of the conversation is like, what's something unique or interesting that you're involved in? But I'm going to call it out for you. What's that thing that you're involved in with the 100 men? I was going to say 100 men who don't give a damn, but that's not it. It's who do give a damn.
It's 100 men who give a damn, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting nonprofit. It's all locally based, but there are chapters across the U.S. There's 100 women who give a hoot, I think, is the women version of it. They just did our last quarterly meeting. They had the women come out as well. local women's chapter. So they did a huge event. But basically what it is each quarter you commit to donating $100 to a nonprofit. You have a nonprofit pool where folks, anyone in the local area that has a 501c3 can apply for and become admitted to the pool. They do a random drawing every quarter for 3 of those organizations. And then they have those 3 organizations come out to a meeting with 100 members that have all committed to donating $100. And the selected charity gets a $10,000 check on the spot.
Wow. Wow.
So
that's really cool.
They have to be local. They have to have a local impact on the community, a demonstrable commitment to the community. They have to be they have to be able to identify what they would do with the money, so that we know what we're throwing money at. But you get an organization like that. We definitely have north of 100 members, so it provides us with a bunch of flexibility. So, for instance, each of the charities that do enter the drawing come out, they all get some money. Obviously, the first selected gets the $10,000. We also have some sponsors and different corporate partners that help as well. So it's a great organization for us. It's relatively easy. People can sign up to have like a PayPal automatic subscription come out every quarter, so you don't even have to attend the events. But obviously, it's another networking opportunity, and you get to get out and meet folks and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's a great organization that I was able to find through networking.
Yeah. So, what are some of the organizations you guys have helped?
So there were several that were having to deal with like special needs children. I'd have to look back through to remember all of the names off the top of my head. But there was, victims of domestic violence, some of the homeless in the local area, again, special needs children, veterans placement. So there were a bunch of different organizations like that. But again, they're all local. They're not, Goodwill's not coming out, or Red Cross or any of that. These are strictly local to our area that operate within the Research Triangle, which is what, Raleigh, Durham, Cary area.
That's awesome, man.
All that operate within here. But that's not even what I would answer that question with. Because
go ahead.
That's a nonprofit venture that is great, and they do wonderful things. If you have a local chapter, you should join them for sure. 100 Men Who Give a Damn. But one of the big things that I've gotten to be a part of is a local veteran networking group called Raleigh Vet Connect.
Yep.
And what was great about them is not only did it's a professional organization of professionals solely looking for other veterans to connect with, network with, and to help. So it's a huge networking group that we meet up monthly to do an evening event, usually at a brewery, where we have everybody come together, just network with folks. We talk about, is anyone hiring? Is anyone, looking for a specific thing? Who here is representing a specific company? But it helps get you familiar with some of those employers you may not get. So all those informational interviews you're going to request over LinkedIn, we have a spot for that. It's professional. Everyone's dressed to the nines for the most. I mean, you can come in a t-shirt if you want, but you get that professionalism of, this isn't like, hey, let's beat the VA. It's, hey, this is what I do on a day-to-day basis. These are the teams that we have within our organization and how they function, to really answer a lot of those questions that you may not even know to ask until you start talking to folks.
Yeah.
But we also started doing a monthly coffee meetup the last Friday of every month, and I've kind of taken that on as to organize and put on. And it just provides another opportunity for folks that may not be able to come out in the evening when their kids have soccer or whatever else. If you can take an hour off of work and come out and meet up with folks, it provides an opportunity to do that. So that's been a big driver of some of the things that I've tried to do, because like I said, I'm back to the networking and doing informational interviews and all that. It never really stops. It's how you figure out what's good for you, what's going to work for you, what you want to do. And I'm going to continue to do it until I stop looking for work altogether, probably.
Yeah.
So,
Fun fact, I joined that Raleigh Vet Connect for about 6 months when I thought I was moving to North Carolina. You see
me, and then you just said, "Oh, we're not really moving there." Jerk.
I mean, we had dinner and we went and ate ice cream afterward. I mean, it was good. We had a nice picture. That's
And
good.
anytime you give me ice cream, you can't see it for a reason because it would take up the whole screen. But
It's so
Alex
weird. This guy, he was mid 20s. I think you were like 26 or 27 when we were hanging out in Georgia. You were skinny, and then you're just not skinny anymore. But that's okay. You're older. I was never skinny, but I was skinnier than I am now. I'll tell you that.
Mhm.
But man, you know, we've busted an hour already. Look at that. You know, it's like two old friends catching up.
Right.
Exactly like that. But you know, I'm glad you came on the show, even though like you don't have a job right now, because what you're going through right now, what you're doing right now, it's important for people to know. It's important because there are people who are like getting ready to get out of school or to retire from the military, separate from the military, and they're like, how do I do it? What do I do? How do I network? All this stuff. You know, you just got to get out there and meet people, and you know, don't be one of those people like, hi, I'm so and so. How can you help me? What? No, like what? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, like but anyway, man, it was awesome. Thanks for coming on. I don't have any more questions for you, but if you have okay, wait, actually I do have one more question.
All right.
So you know, we talked about networking, that's a big thing. But if there's one thing, one piece of advice other than like networking, you know, getting connected with veteran organizations or like even getting involved in the community, if there's one thing that you can, a piece of advice or encouragement that you give to somebody who's getting out of school or getting out of the military or changing jobs completely, whatever the case may be, and it's something that you haven't already mentioned, what is that?
Solve for X. And what I mean by that is everyone's transition is going to be an algorithm, right? There's a whole lot of factors that have to line up. X is all of the problems you can solve. So if it's prepare financially, if it's realize where you want to move, if you want to move at all, those sorts of things that are within your control, take ownership of them early and be prepared when that day comes where your active duty check is going to stop. You've already solved those problems.
Nice. All right. That's it. That's all we got for y'all. That was a good piece of advice. I appreciate that. Hang on. Don't hang up, man. I'm going to see you in the studio after we get off this stream. But everybody out there, hope you guys have a great week. I will not be back on the air next Monday because it's Memorial Day. I'm taking time off to remember those who have gone before me and to spend some time with my family. And to all the veterans out there, thank you for your service. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I can't tell you who's going to come on because I don't remember, but I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a good one. See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.